G'day, Warren. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Grant, yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's nice to finally
Abs-
catch up with you.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Good to catch up with you too. Why don't we start with who you are and why you do what you do?
Cool. Warren Keelan's my name. I'm an ocean photographer based out of Wollongong on the New South Wales south coast. I've been shooting now in the water for about 13 years.
Hmm.
I turned my passion into my dream job around 2013 when I opened my first gallery. And I've been self-employed and working just to create ocean images and art ever since. And yeah, have a lot of stories, and yeah, I'm really motivated. I'm really passionate about what I do.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let's talk about the motivation. What is it that gets you going? What gets you in the water? Was it being in the water first that kicked off the passion for trying to capture it, or
Yep.
was it I've seen this and I really want to get into it? How did that work for you?
I think it was a childhood thing. I was born on the east coast of Australia here, and
Hmm.
when I was 5, we moved to WA, and my father became a national park ranger, situated right on the coast and far from any towns. We grew up in that environment with the bush and the coast, and just gained a natural appreciation for what that meant, and didn't realize it until I come back when I was 15 from the
Sure.
west back to the east and started surfing with a few friends, fishing and surfing and diving, those kind of things, because I still live on the coast. And just the smell of the salt and the waves and surfing, the experience I've had in the ocean, that really is my drive, just to be in the water.
Yeah.
I feel confident and natural in the water than I do on
Okay.
land. And to be able to take a camera into the water and create images from what I see and feel, that's what motivates me.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So, what's your earliest photographic memory? Where did it all start? Where did you get your first camera, and how did you start with making the images?
Yeah, I've read a lot and I've listened to a lot of podcasts and interviews where the photographers say I was handed a camera when I was a kid.
Hmm.
I vaguely remember having, I think it might have been a Hanimex brand or
Oh yeah,
something back in the day, really, the wide rolls, 110 thing rolls, I think they
yeah.
were, and and I didn't really think of it at the time. So then fast forward into my late 20s, I got my first, and I was
Hmm.
shooting film for a while, and I was doing some slow shutter stuff with waterfalls, and I just didn't really find it, for me, that challenging. I was
Yeah. Okay.
growing up in the ocean and being in that different environment. It's more of an extreme environment. Then the invent of water housings for cameras meant I could merge the two, and I really wanted to create landscapes from within the ocean. That was the
Yeah.
first thing I wanted to do. But prior to that, I actually was a fishing photojournalist.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went from making images and traveling and doing the travel and lifestyle photography. Then during that time I was doing landscapes, and once I bought my first water housing, it just changed everything.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Do you think it's important to have goals and projects in your photography? Do you set yourself goals, and if so, how?
My wife's pretty much the goal setter. She's very
Okay.
good at time management, so she does set her yearly and 5-year goals and monthly goals. But I'm pretty terrible in
Okay.
that. I live in the moment more so than looking at what I'd like to create 12 months down the track.
Mm.
I've found that a lot of the images that I create have just come from being in the water. A lot of them I do think about before going out there, but because that
Yeah.
environment's so often changing and evolving, you're left with those elements. So I can say I want to do a series or a project on this particular wave or break or technique and method, but you can go there countless times and it's always not in your favor. But since I've been in the shop, I've been selling printed artworks now for over a decade, and
Yeah.
I do find that when I do have a concept, I'll just stick it in the background and I kind of work on it and
Yeah.
not give it an end. I don't want to launch it or just want to do. I just when I'm ready, I'll say I feel comfortable with what I've made,
Yeah.
and I'll put together something and eventually release it that way. But no, I'm a fly by the seat of my pants.
Okay.
Every day I get up and my mind's a mess anyway. Yeah, no. To answer your question, no, probably not.
You did mention having some kind of concept about what it is. How does
Mm.
that sort of take shape? Is it something that you're thinking around that you've not done before, or something that you've seen elsewhere and you just want to get into? But how
Yeah.
do the concepts come to you?
Let's just being in the ocean. You 360 degrees is something to shoot, and you can turn your back on the sun, and you can
Yep.
lower your shutter speed, and you've got something else to create. The waves are always moving, so you do have a moving subject.
Mm.
Point the camera at the sun, and up goes the shutter speed and your aperture, and you just make something completely different every time.
Yeah.
If you take that environment and you place that on the hundreds of headlands and points and beaches along the coast here, there's always something new to create. But every time I'm in the water, I'll always keep my wits about me. I'm always looking around and seeing what angles and perspectives are
Yeah.
changing. But then it comes down to what lens I'm using. So my favorite lens is the 70 to 200. I really love that sort of the distance and the compression and the clarity of that lens. But under the water, that doesn't work as well. So if I go to wide angle under the water, I'm always looking at what I can do. If it's early morning, I can slow the shutter down and just try to find different perspectives. Everything's been shot before, as far as I'm concerned, every angle and everything, but there's got to be a unique take on it somewhere. So that's the challenge, I think,
Yeah.
every day.
I guess talking about the process there, how do you go about selecting a lens before you go out? Because obviously, out in the water, are you free
Mm-hmm.
swimming? Are you on a board? Or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Percent of the time, I'm just with flippers in a wetsuit, and
yep,
my camera's either just tethered to my arm with a strap. And that's what I do. I just swim out and just swim around the ocean. Here's an example for you. So this morning I was up on sunrise and the waves were only about half a meter to a meter.
sure,
So not quite large, but they were really clean in the ocean. The sky was really nice. So what I would do is then use that low light and crank my shutter speed down to about a 13th or 10th and just
yep,
stand up in the shallows and play with the waves as they're moving past me
yeah,
and just get that sort of painterly effect. But if I was to use another lens today, it wouldn't have worked. And then
yeah,
once the sun's up, the sun reaches above you, it lights up the sea floor. And if the water's clear, then I'll switch it up. I might put a fisheye lens or a
yeah,
16 to 35, for example. That gives me another sort of playground to work with if the
yeah.
conditions are right. So just in one day, there's probably 3 or 4 different lenses and techniques you could use.
Okay,
Times that by every day, and it's confusing because if you want to go to a certain waterfall, you've got to wait for that light, and with everything's right, you're still in that sort of that you're standing around in the same rocks and things like that. But
yeah,
out in the
right,
ocean, it's just continually changing.
yeah,
That's the challenge. I think that's what inspires me.
yeah. Cool, cool. I guess for me, it's a little bit different to what I do. I'm doing seascapes, but I'm usually standing on a rock shelf somewhere or on a beach,
Yes, yeah,
and I've got my gear in a backpack that I can. It's a sling, and I can swing it around to the front, and I can change lenses like that. You've got
awesome.
to climb out of the water, go and find your gear, and change
Yeah,
lenses, and then get back in. Is that really what it's like?
I'm fortunate to have a couple of water housings and cameras, which I can switch around if I do. But generally, most of the time, I'll just pick a lens and I'll use that lens to shoot with because you just become overwhelmed.
Yeah,
You in
yeah,
the water, you've got one lens and make the most of that lens. And that and in that sense, you get to know that lens pretty well. Like you become quite intimate with the lens and what it can do in its sweet spots.
mhm,
The 70 to 200 is quite heavy to
yeah,
to swim around with in the ocean there. It's a quite the reprieve to take out, say, let's say a fisheye,
yeah.
and you can use it one-handed as opposed to the two-handed thing.
Mm.
But there's inherent dangers for you also. You're clambering around on the rocks, and you've got all these lenses, and you're changing lenses in the middle of a wave coming towards you, and all sorts of things. There's a
Yeah,
lot going on,
yeah.
hey.
I keep an eye out for that sort of thing. It's you try and make your lens changes between sets.
Yeah, yeah, that's
That
right.
that said, some days I don't change. It's just like, okay, that's it. Or I might change after I've done, say, a wider panoramic shot with a 16 to 35, for example, and then I might go and do some wave shots where you, similar to what you were talking about, where you're getting down into the shallows. I've got a monopod leg, which basically comes with me as well. It's part of my tripod. I just unclip the rest of the tripod from it, stick it in the backpack, and away I go with the monopod.
Awesome.
But so that's where I'll get out the 70 to 200 and try and get in close to some of the waves. Yeah, it's a bit different, but I'm mostly trying to stay dry. Not that I succeed a lot.
Yeah, no, I get you there. And with that lens too, you can get right up close and get real detailed shots.
Absolutely.
The water movement is it's just really calming to look at, that painterly effect with the colors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen some of your works, and you're looking at the foreground right through to the background in that composition.
Basically,
there's a lot to take in, and then you have to wonder whether the light's in the right spot and the waves and everything. Yeah, that's pretty challenging.
Yeah, oh, it's good fun.
Rewarding too. Yeah.
I guess talking about the process of experimentation, you talked about trying to find something unique. How do you use that process to push the boundaries of your creativity, and how do you in any experimentation you're going to have failures? How do you deal with that? Is that just a learning process, or I'm interested in that sort of process of taking it through from that concept initially to a finished product, going through that process of failing to do it sometimes, because not every shot we're going to take is a banger.
Yeah, that's 100%. You could, for me, if I'm going to, let's say, standing on a cliff looking down a wave break, if I'm shooting at 1250th and higher, and I'm documenting that wave as it's going past.
Yep.
And there's only so much you can do from the position that you're in, at your standpoint. So you're looking at it, and your lenses might change. But if you're shooting fast and you're freezing the wave as it's going through, you might get more frames and you might get more keepers.
Yeah.
But it's just, you're just documenting what that part of nature is doing at that specific moment in time. Slow your shutter speed down, and you might get 1 out of 20 from there. And then out of those 1 out of 20s, you might keep 1 out of 100 of those 1 of 20s.
Yeah.
And that kind of, for me, that is the challenge. And to get that interpretation, that impressionistic interpretation of a wave in motion, that's the difference. And then whilst you're swimming, that's a challenge as well, because you're also moving as well as the camera's moving. So you're panning and you're kicking as well. So you're swimming amongst the elements, and that's so much more rewarding when you do actually get one. Standing on the shore is great too, and you can do forced pans across the horizon.
Yep.
They're really fun to create, and I really love them because they come up well in print. But then the challenge for me to go in the water and try and create that's different as well, because you're actually using the wave as it's moving past. So you're not forcing that pan; you're actually creating a slower pan with the wave.
Yeah.
So, and if it's big enough, or if it's small enough, you can just sit there whilst the sun rises, and you've got that 20-minute window to try and make as many as you can.
Yeah.
But then take that concept, change lenses, put a wide angle on, and dive under the wave and look at that wave rolling across the shoreline under the water, and try and use those same principles. You'd be surprised at what you can actually create.
Yeah.
And the colors, and you really get to know what exposure and focus under the water. And then look at the wave. Not only the wave might break in shore to one way towards the shore, but there's so many different angles that you can capture that from. That all mixes it up, plus your shutter speed, timing, and the time of day that you're shooting. And then if you're behind a wave and you add a surfer or a swimmer or a body surfer or something, that adds another aspect to it. I think I shot about 1,000 photos this morning over a 2.5 hour period. And I'm just going through them before we're speaking, and there's probably 2 or 3 that I like out of them.
Yep.
And I might keep one. But the others I'll store, because in that moment, that's what I was chasing. But down the track, when I revisit those folders, I'll see something that that
Yeah.
I might connect with it at a later stage.
Yeah.
And then that, going back to your other question, is that'll spark another interest. So I'll take something and I'm not focusing on that at the time, but when I revisit those photos, I'll just go, that's pretty cool. I like how I've got some close-ups of some bubbles or some bokeh.
Yeah.
How
Right.
can I go out there and actually make a series using those elements?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Awesome. In talking about that style, where did that start to develop for you? That the realization that, okay, I'm no longer just documenting these shots, it's now art. Where did that sort of start for you?
As soon as I realized that I could change the image that I was making by a few tweaks on the back of the camera, it became paint with using a brush, the camera, sorry, as a brush as opposed to a device to document what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unfortunately, you just go down this path of everything has to be abstract. You're pushing it to the limits. By
Yep.
the time you've finished, you look at something and it doesn't look like at all what you were out capturing.
Yeah. Right.
That in itself is pretty cool, but then to try and translate that back to a viewer, and as an ocean photographer, I really like the concept of the ocean. I like being in it, but there are many images that just don't. It's not obvious that's water,
Yeah.
and that in itself is pretty cool. I really dig that. It makes you anything that makes you think. If you have to look at an image and it's not apparent in the first few seconds or minutes, and makes you think a little bit deeper about what you're looking at, then that for me is a successful creation.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask what defines success for you in your photography, and you basically just nailed it.
Yeah, just geez, there's a lot. Everything from receiving emails that you're sort of hoping to receive, making an image that you've conceptualized in your head prior to going out, and months of failures,
Yeah. Yeah.
traveling long distance to a break or a piece of coastline, or even to go and visit wildlife, whales and turtles and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and coming up with that particular shot. That's
Yeah.
unreal. And then there's other times where I'll be in my store, and one specific moment was a lady come in and she looked at an image on the wall, and it was a monotone wave shot, and she just stared at it for a little while, and she broke down. It was a lady that just broke down into tears, and
Wow.
she turned around to me and waved to me and just said, "I'll be back." But she walked out of the store and came back in and actually explained to me the reason that it affected her, and she ended up buying the shot off the wall because it
Yeah. Wow.
moved her. So that in itself that's an incredibly powerful feeling to see, just from
Absolutely.
something that you've created.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Mastering your craft is obviously a big part of every photographer's sort of journey. How did you go about learning the basics first off, and then extending on those basics? Were you talking to other photographers, experimenting and playing around for yourself, or using things like YouTube and just looking at tutorials and going, okay, I'll give that a go?
Oh, look, Grant, compared to now, there's a plethora of information out there
Oh, absolutely.
on what to do. And I think that's fantastic. When I first started, especially with ocean photography, there wasn't anything. There was a few people that I really loved their work. I'm a sonic artist, so I played guitar and progressive rock bands for over a decade.
Sure.
And I really love the people pushing the limits in that sonic realm. But going back to, I draw a lot of inspiration from music in that regard. But when I first started, embarrassingly, I just took the camera down, and my first camera, I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. I thought a long exposure was something. I had no idea what aperture was, and I was trying to show my wife that it was worth investing in the camera gear,
Yeah.
and no, it was just complete failures. But there were probably two, let's call them forums or blogs
Yep.
online, where I used to visit just to understand aperture and a little bit about slow shutter photography, what
Yeah.
ISO meant. And then one day, after, I don't know, it might have been about 6 months, the concept of the exposure triangle just oof, it just made sense.
Yeah,
And
right.
so I got to the stage where I could look outside and think, I know exactly what I could need to use to shoot what I want to shoot.
Yep.
And then it went from there to using that exposure triangle to create something. And that was when I was hooked. It was actually, no, the camera became a tool then, not just, it didn't rule me. I know what's happening. Once you
Yeah.
understand light, as you do, it's, yeah, you then you use that information and those skills to create and document from there.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Do you see your photography as a useful tool in terms of environmental awareness and getting people to think about the world that we live in different ways? Obviously, the environment's really important to yourself. Is that something that you're trying to convey? Do you try to use that as a means of getting the word out that we've actually got to look after these environments?
Firstly, I hope so. I hope my images do have some sort of sway in that regard,
Mhm.
just to show people how beautiful the world is and the environment, especially the ocean. We're all connected by water,
Yeah.
and we really need to look after it. Then, on top of that, I really do hope that I have it. I'm balancing between my creative side and my pursuit of environmental awareness.
Mm.
So I try to use my platform and what I do for that information and bringing awareness of the threats to the environment, but also to balance that again with the beauty of it. So it's not all the bad news all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that came from early years. My father, as I was saying before, was a national park ranger. My mother was an injured wildlife officer. So the need to care for the environment and its inhabitants was foremost for us growing up. And then that really planted a deep seed of my how I am consciously thinking about the world I'm living in and my footprint. Yeah, we can only do so much. We're
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with what's happening in the world. If you look at everything on the internet, it's overwhelming. It's depressing. So
Yeah.
you pick and choose what you can actually do in your daily life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
per year, and how much time you can spend and invest on that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I'm happy to, and I'm really, what's the word for it? I'm privileged to be able to not only share my work, but if it can somehow make a difference,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Have you been in any situations where you've seen pollution and or injured wildlife or anything like that, and you've just gone,
Yep.
this is really why you've got to get that message out there?
Yeah, many occasions. I'm a member of Orca,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just volunteers to help injured and endangered sea life mammals and beached mammals. So it was that goes back a long way, even through to just the rubbish that goes down the drain and into the ocean
Yeah.
and things like that. As I said before, I was a fishing journalist, so I saw the impacts of overfishing, professional fishing,
Yep.
and what that does on the food chain in certain parts of the world. I've seen coral change over the Great Barrier Reef,
Yep.
even right down to seeing turtles and things with drag nets and things on the beach with gulls and sea life just they're dead just from those things. So that really has an impact. But the main one I think was a few years ago. I was down at the local beach in Wollongong, and we had a calf whale that
Yeah.
washed up on shore. Unfortunately, the calf was still alive.
Oh, wow.
They tried prior to me being there. They tried to push it back out, and it come back in, and it caused more injuries. And we nursed it until it passed, unfortunately. So that was quite an overwhelming and emotional event. And it
Yeah.
was literally the next day I became an Orca member. So
Yeah.
it's so those kind of things, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ha-
No,
Have you seen much in your own? even
Uh,
scouting the coastlines and things like that? You see the impact of humans and
yeah,
rubbish.
unfortunately, a little bit. I actually carry a little nylon fold up bag, folds up to a couple of inches and sticks in the back of my backpack. I was out at, where was it? It was up at Port Stephens on the weekend and found along where the waves had washed up a bunch of plastic, and it looked like a broken up those big bread crates, the big
Yeah.
red ones.
Hmm.
Yeah, and there was just chunks. There were no chunk was bigger than about 3 or 4 inches around, but it was just hundreds of these things scattered all over the
Oh,
beach.
wow. Hmm.
I just basically used the bag, scooped as many of them up as I could find, and took them off the beach and got them into a bin. But yeah, even putting them in a bin, you can't guarantee that it's not getting back out into the
No,
water somewhere, unfortunately.
that's what I guess it's your, I guess you just have to do what you can do. And,
Exactly.
and if
Yeah.
you didn't do that, it would still be there.
Yeah.
I
Or float off to another beach or foul a seagull or somebody, some other sea life.
Yes. Yeah. Coming even right into your home is everything you use from plastic straws and things like that. We're becoming more aware of that. And I guess is the push that we, as photographers and people that do what we do, to play the role in providing an education for others that might not even think about those small things that we can do. Because
Absolutely.
everything has an impact. And even to the point where I'll go for a coffee and take my keep cup and
Yep.
walk along the ocean as you have, you just explained with a bag, and I'll just take a bag and just fill it with anything I can find along the beach,
Yeah.
just pop it in the bin. And it not only for good conscience, but knowing that's now off
Yeah.
the beach.
It's off the
So it's not
beach.
going to get blown into the water.
It's not
And
where.
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I take my hat off to anyone that does that.
Yeah. I know another thing that you've been a strong advocate for is men's mental health. Talk to me a bit about what you've been doing in that space.
Yeah, for sure. Just through personal, everyone has their own sort of experience with mental health.
Yep.
I and I won't say suffer. I don't like to use the word suffer because that tends to lean towards I can't do anything and it's always bombarding me. But I endure
Yeah.
anxiety. I've had quite high anxiety now for that I'm aware of now for a decade or two,
Mm-hmm.
and that has its impacts daily or weekly or yearly, and I can see how much it impacts me. I recognize those things, and that's what the ocean does for me. It plays an important part in calming me as a human because my mind races all the time, and I just don't stop
Yeah.
thinking. And the only time I really get a break from my head is in the water.
Mm.
But also being an advocate for lots of different charities, and just not being afraid to share those experiences publicly. I think
Yeah.
that it helps when I talk about things like that I go through. And hopefully, if it makes a difference in someone else's life and they think that it's okay to talk about it, then that's great too. Just in saying that, I was approached a month ago to join a bunch of guys from two men's mental health charities
Mm-hmm.
to walk the Kokoda Trail in Papua New Guinea.
Cool.
Not only to do it, but to document it and document the experiences of, let's say, a bunch of average men doing something above average.
Yeah.
And it was just the most incredibly difficult, mentally, physically, emotionally challenging thing I've ever done in my life. And I came back and I use the term glass is now full because
Yeah.
it gave me a lot of perspective and realizing what's actually important, who's important in your life. And it gave me a great sense of clarity. So I've come back now from that, which was a month ago, and we're actually editing a documentary on
Nice.
that. So putting my money where my mouth is and
Yeah. Yeah.
being visual and vocal on that stuff. But no, I'll any day of the week, I'll let you know. I've had a lot of personal experience with that and family, unfortunately, in certain aspects.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's you can't escape it. It's something you deal with every day, and if you can just get a grip on it and use it. So I constantly say this thing, even with musicians, when I was in a band playing, is
Yeah.
we're gifted, not inflicted, but creatives are gifted with this thing called depression and anxiety and self-doubt.
Yep.
And I don't know one person that creates that hasn't got any of those.
I think it's an important aspect to creativity is the self-doubt, I think, what's the right term for it? I guess the suffering or endurance that you go through are the things that actually help you create, because they form feelings and form thoughts that allow you to express yourself in whatever way you choose to do that. Yeah, it's the expression of those things, I think, that actually helps people work through some of their problems too. I was talking to Andrew Barufi a few weeks ago on the podcast, and he has a book out called Heal, and it's literally all about how he's documented his experience from suicidal depression through to basically healing himself through photography. And I think that expression and the ability to actually create something beautiful really does help you develop a much better mental state longer term.
Oh, I agree 100%. And it's therapeutic, and it's, if you can vocalize it or put something out, like that's pretty crazy what he's done.
Yeah,
And it would definitely help people. I can assure you that anything that's spoken about that has an impact on, if it just saves one person's life or it
absolutely.
curves their thoughts, then that's a positive thing, right? That's a really cool thing.
I think the discussion of it's really important too. It's something that does get shied away in society quite a lot. And the thing is that, on the whole, I'd say most people suffer from some form of mental illness at some point in their life, whether it be anxiety all the way through to depression and indeed self-harm and those sorts of things. If you can talk about it and bring it into the light, it becomes a whole lot less scary. And I think it also becomes the ability for you to share your experience with people that have also had similar experiences, and you realize you're not the only person that's going through it or has been through it, and you're not the only person, you're not on your own,
No,
basically, which is where a lot of that mindset, I think, comes from.
that's right. And talking to people and being open, and you create an environment where others can talk, you get to understand yourself a lot more, and you
Absolutely.
become confident. But you also allowing yourself, or giving yourself permission to be vulnerable in front of others, and that in turn gives them permission, and it just has a positive effect all around. Whether it's a diagnosed illness or if it's something that you just think you're feeling and you're having bad times, and you're going to get through it. But
Yeah.
it's, at the end of the day, it's, you just have to talk. And us buggers, us men, we're really crap at it. We
Yeah.
just
Well,
we don't let those doors open enough. And you really do.
definitely not.
It's just something that's built in and eventually finds its way out, whether it's talking or through self-harm and alcohol abuse and things like that.
Yeah.
It'll bubble to the surface eventually.
Yeah.
But by talking, you can keep it subdued, that the harmful effects of mental health, and you can carry on. You can get through another day.
Totally. Totally. Let's talk about something slightly more uplifting. Where did you make the choice to set up your own gallery? How did that come about? Did you just wake up one day and say, I want a gallery, and off we go? Or...
Pretty much. I finished being, I was a touring musician in the early 2000s. During that time, I was also building websites. I was a self-taught web designer.
Yep.
So I had a bit of income coming through in various forms that was self-employed forms. I haven't worked for a company or a business for a long time.
Sure.
And then I was taking photos, and on the side, I was doing some market stalls and a few exhibitions.
Yep.
And I found that there was a bit of interest there, and I was selling a few prints. After the opening, you start your Facebook page and Instagram, when that first came out, I was lucky to be part of that startup of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So been on there quite a few years now. What is it? 13, 14, 15 years Instagram's been
Something like that, yeah.
going, and that's an unusual beast as well. But
Mm.
it was probably in 2012 I really took it seriously, and to the point where I knew that's what I wanted to do. I've had a lot of different hats, and some of them I'm wearing at the same time. But this, particularly with photography, I felt I connected through that form of creativity. I really love writing songs and playing live, and that process for me was really important. And just to be creative, it's the same when I'm building and websites, and I was building and I was doing graphic design and I was doing all these other things. But the key thing was just being creative and having an outlet for that. And
Yeah.
that became photography. And I, going back to talking about creating an image or having the thought process of an image, there was one there where when a wave breaks and it breaks towards you underneath, if it's shallow and it's heavy enough and it traps air, the rolling of that forward motion on the wave creates these spiraling rings under the water.
Yep.
And I've seen them a million times when I was surfing.
Mm.
And I never thought anything of it. You just close your eyes, and most people close their eyes under a breaking wave.
Yeah.
And I thought, how am I going to take a photo of this? I really wanted to capture that in some way. So it was about 6 months of bringing that thought out of my mind into the ocean. And eventually there was one day, and I remember it was in 2013, and
Yep.
I was using a fisheye lens, and the fisheye lens I was using, it's quite an older lens, and it's restricted to 3 frames a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, in servo mode, because it's not motor driven. So quite a slow lens, but incredibly sharp. It's a really sought after lens. I dived under the wave, and it was sunrise, and the wave broke, and everything happened perfectly. And so when I'm 3 frames a second means that the first one is just to focus. Whatever I get in the next frame is the one. And the third frame or fourth frame is just whitewash.
Yeah.
And I got up out of the water and I looked at my camera, and I just, in disbelief, I thought, I let out a yelp. And I was like, yeah, this is crazy. This is the one I've been taking. In my mind, I'm actually looking at it on the screen. So I entered that into the underwater category of the International Landscape Photography Awards back in 2013. And I just thought, this is really different. I'm not sure how the judges would look at it and perceive it, but I received an email once they received the awards came out, and I'll never forget, one of the things about that rewarding side of photography is getting an email that you thought, no, that's not going to happen, or you might, but you're going to go and check it anyway. And I opened the email, showed my wife, and I choked up, because that was an image and a concept that I'd been thinking about for so long. I was able to put that into an image and show people, and that you consider them peers in the world of awards. So I got that photo and I thought, this is it. I know what I'm doing now. And it gave me the confidence to pursue that full time. And then lo and behold, just 800 meters from my home, just in Wollongong, just literally down the street in the center of town, a little store came up for lease, and it was the right price and it was the right size. I just applied for it, and I got the keys within about 2 weeks. So it went from being something that I was really passionate about, and I was selling a few prints here and there, but it was within about 3 or 4 weeks I was in there, and I'd set up, and I had a place, I had my own store surrounded by my own work. So
cool.
Consider that successful, and that was a dream come true at the time.
Yeah, awesome. Talk us through the process of actually setting the gallery up. You've got to get a load of prints. You've got to get the place in a condition where you can hang them all. You've got to do a load of stuff. What did that look like, and how long did that kind of take you to get through?
So in terms of interior, you don't really have to do that much. Just paint the walls white. I had an electrician come in. I did set up some LED, some rail lights around the top.
Yep.
I put in some benches, waist height all the way around, and a desk. And I had a partition that had a little sink in it, and a bits and pieces out the back. Yeah. And essentially that was it. The space that I'm in is one of 4 room stores in a part of a building in that street. It's a very old building, almost considered heritage listing.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot I could do to it physically,
Right.
but I didn't need to. So I put a nice desk in the center, and it's been unchanged for 10 years. But just, some paint and some lights and things like that.
Yeah.
And then it's the marketing side of it. So let's go
Yeah.
back to what you're asking about prints. How do you decide what goes in there? So
Yeah.
your best work, what you consider the best mediums, whether it's glass or framed or canvas or matted prints. How do you display them? How do you market them? You've got a visit, like a store that you have tangible artworks in. You need to be able to pay rent then, the overheads associated. So you've got a internet phone line and
Yep.
and rent and electricity and insurances and things that come out with that. So you have to consider that in terms of what you're displaying and what you want to sell.
Yeah.
I love the dark abstract images, but they sell, but they don't sell enough to pay the rent.
Yeah.
But then
they're a niche market.
that's right, yeah. And then you have to consider you become a tourist destination. So you have to consider the people that may be coming to the area that want to take something away that resembles Wollongong, where I'm from, or the local surrounds. So I'd like to create images that have that artistic something that I created that I like, but also to have something that is going to sell for the area.
That's
so
it.
you don't want to compromise your integrity, but you also want to consider what's
How
going
do
to
you
sell.
get that balance right?
I have a very lovely wife who is she's a great compass in that respect. She 9 times out of 10 I say, no, I'm not going to print that, and then she'll say, oh, that's the one that's going to sell. So I print it and it sells 9 times out of 10. She's on the money. But then I have that space there where I can have a lot of different sizes and mediums. And over the years, you get people that come in and just want to buy a print of Wollongong, and then the other people come in and they just want the most abstract art piece they can get.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then it's how do you let people know that your shop's there? Because you can open up, but if no one knows where you are, they're not going to come in and see you.
That's right.
And yeah, all the free platforms, the social media platforms. One thing I did do, this is back before, let's say, social media, was to. I always believe that a handshake and a face-to-face means more than an unsolicited email to somebody.
Yeah, definitely.
So I printed, I believe it was about 1,500 deal flyers, and I visited all the post offices on the south coast here, and I paid to be able to drop those in mail boxes that allowed unsolicited mail.
Yeah.
And then I took about 2 weeks of just driving from the north coast to the south coast, and I visited almost every office and shop. And I went and introduced myself and told them what I do, and I gave him an invite to pop down to the store.
Yeah, nice.
And though a lot of people, particularly, let's say the older generation, it was refreshing that somebody wanted to come in face to face and say hello.
Yeah.
And in terms of that really kicked off what I wanted to do. And that was my best form of marketing.
Yeah, awesome.
At the time. Yeah.
One of the things you talked about there was picking your best work. Is it as simple as showing it to the wife and saying, okay, that's the one? How do you cull it down? Because they're all your babies. You love this shot.
Yes.
It's not going to sell because it's too dark or too green or whatever. How do you go about that putting a critical eye on those images and saying, yep, yes, and no? How do you make those yes/no decisions?
Look, we all do. And we also have that. We're very critical of our own work. I think you have to give yourself a little bit of. You have to go easy on yourself at some stage, but most of the time, I can go out in the water and shoot for 2 hours, shoot 2,000 shots, and come back. If it's still not good enough, that'll sit in the folder and not get the light. The light won't see that. In saying that, you really have to be conscious of not being overcritical, because just one slight movement in a wave, that most people might not see it, but you are, and you're really conscious of that exact thing. But go back to it weeks later, and it's exactly what might strike you in that moment. Right. But yeah, to print it, it's a completely different story because you've got rental space on the walls of your own store, and each one takes up a certain amount of space, and each one
Yep.
is like real estate. I'm aware of how abstract and arty I can go,
Yeah.
but then that might be only sort of 10% of what I have in the shop. And then I
Yeah.
have a blend of animals and sharks and turtles, which I also love, and also landscapes and seascapes from the local area. But being there long enough, like after a few years, you get to know what will and won't sell.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can use that as a guide as well.
Mm.
But yeah, if I'm going to give any set of advice, it would be not to jeopardize your integrity for the sake of making a sale, because what that'll do is it'll force you to go down a path that you will regret.
Yeah.
You will find that years down the track, you're selling images that aren't of your true self and your creative expression. Yeah, that's just
And I
something to
think
be mindful.
that's an important thing when a customer starts that relationship with your work. That's what they're looking for in a lot of cases. Sometimes, as you say, it might just be, I need a memento of my holiday in Wollongong.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's fine. The more arty stuff in particular, the reason that person is investing in that piece of art might not be for future financial gain, but they're investing in that because they see something in that image that expresses something to them and they want to hang on their wall. And that's, I think, really important for your artistic integrity or any artist's integrity to put some of themselves into that work.
I agree. You have to be very careful what you do. There are a lot of other photographers around the area in every area of the world.
Yep.
As I don't, I have a drone, but I don't publish drone photos.
Yeah.
I'm like, because there are drone photographers and they do
That's
it
right.
really well, and that's their genre, and that's what they focus on. If they're going to be known for that subject, then that's great. And also to real estate photographers and portrait photographers, I really dabbling in lots of different things, especially the portraiture side in the ocean.
Mm.
But it's the art that you choose to share is what you're going to be known for. So if I liken it to your favorite band or your favorite musician, you're not seeing that musician do a country version and a metal version of everything.
Yeah.
Because that's what I follow. I follow that specific band for that music. It's very confusing when you see artists do different takes on different genres. So when that applies to any art like photography, I don't think that spreading yourself too thin can be quite harmful.
Yeah,
in the long term.
Being in a niche is sometimes depends on how broad that niche is, but being in a niche is, I think, important. That said, if you look at my Instagram feed or any of my socials, you'll see a wide variety of stuff simply because it's what I'm interested in taking shots of at that time, and that's what I'm putting up. In terms of what goes onto the website, that's slightly different.
Yeah, but for me, I've looked at yours, and you do have a theme there, and it is. I see it. An overall theme is your vision of the Australian seascapes using abstracts and things like that. So there is a sort of an overall common theme, but you will dabble in other things. You do publish other things. That's a healthy thing to do, I think.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely how I stay fresh. And that's another thing I was going to talk to you about is how do you stay fresh and how do you change it up? Because getting in the water and taking the same shot of a wave, they're not all the same, I know, because every wave's different. But that obviously gets to a point where, okay, I don't really want to do that. The water's too cold in the winter and whatever.
Grant, tell you what,
sunrise and do that.
You know what? It's a hard slog because not only are you getting up, which you do too, you get up to do that, but put on a wetsuit in the middle of winter. And the only thing you want to be thinking about is how warm it is back home.
Exactly. That blanket and pillow is looking pretty good.
Exactly. But then when the sun breaches the horizon and everything, you've got everything, your camera's in there in the water, you don't think about how cold it is, and you don't think about your feet hurting and your face is numb. You think about that photo that's going to appear on your camera because you put yourself into that environment. And for me, there are less people overall in that genre doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it makes it's pretty hard, and to do it over a decade now is quite significant. I've lost a lot of hours sleep, and I put myself into some pretty dangerous places. But it's yeah, that's what I choose to do, and I find
Yeah.
it gives me a buzz, and it's that hit of adrenaline when you see it all come together and you make a photo. That
Yeah.
coffee just seems to taste better afterwards. You know what I mean? Yeah. So how do you, and reinventing yourself is a tough one because years ago I dabbled in flash photography in the water.
Yep.
So you've got the added element of man-made light,
Mm.
which is good and bad in some aspects. But
Yep.
then when I've had a Maddie Smith custom dome made, and that means I can do split shots using a flash. How do you piece all that together? And then when you're traveling, that dome port requires its own Pelican case. So
Yeah.
logistically, it's a nightmare. I'd
Yeah.
go to Lady Elliot Island on the Great Barrier Reef, and I lug all this gear up, and I'm just praying that the weather and everything's perfect.
Yeah.
Great sunrise, lots of turtles around, the tides are okay. And then when I get out there, you realize that you're at the mercy of nature, but then salt water and electronic gear,
Yep.
they're not the best of
Cool.
friends. And it happened to me
I've
once.
killed mine a couple of times,
You
and
have, yeah.
yeah,
It's
brought it back to life. Yeah.
I've drowned 2 flashes. I think I've done 4 cameras, 3 lenses, thousands of dollars worth of gear. But just to go back to, um, I'm still in the water, but I'm using a different dome port, which allows me to create a different perspective under and
Yeah.
over. Then you add the flash element to it. That's another thing. Then some slow shutter, and then you take that into maybe some fresh water, some inland streams and rivers and ponds, and you create those sort of photos from there. And then you can do people, surfers, and things. So constantly trying to look for different ways to express yourself, but using the elements that you're stuck with.
Yep.
That is a challenge. Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. But yeah, it's something that I really like because it keeps the mind going. And most of the time, those ideas come to you at 2 or 3 in the morning,
Oh yeah.
and you think, "Oh God, this is awesome! I know that rock's going to be available for me at low tide. It's going to be
That's
swelling
it.
at the right tide." And you're looking at I used to use this thing called the Photographer's Ephemeris app when it first came out, and it would line
Yeah.
up all the moon and the wind, the sun, and yeah, that was exciting too. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's always new things to do, and I think also too things change when you'll go through a period of where you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just my headphones just cut out. Hang on, I'll just have to put it back on.
You're right.
Am I back with you?
Yep. Yep.
Beauty. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Headphones went into default. Yeah. Where are we?
One of the things that a lot of artists struggle with, particularly those that don't have their own gallery yet, but want to sell prints online, etc. How do you price your work? Do you have a formula that you work it out with, or is it total guesswork?
No, I think there's a bit of a blend of what would you be prepared to pay for a piece of work.
Yeah.
If you looked at a photo, what would you prepared to part with to do that? I think I would say there's a lot more photographers than there were back in the days with the well-known landscape photographers that we know.
Yeah.
Their work was quite pricey at the time. They were using film, and now the advent of digital photography, everyone can do it. They have access to it.
Absolutely.
And then they have access to print, and the quality of the gear now means that you can print anything at any size, generally. And there are other artists. So if I really like the work of other landscape photographers or portrait photographers or ocean photographers, and I look at their work.
Yep.
This is in the early stages, and I've had a lot of people come in and say, I want to open a website, and I'm more than happy to say, look, just have a look at my prices, and if you think you could align yourself with those sort of prices, then go for it. If you think you could, if you think your art has more value, also to go for it. But you also consider with mine, I do have a gallery, and I don't want to outprice myself out of the market.
Yeah. Right.
And also too, I don't want to undervalue what I do. I've done it for so long now. I know what sells and what sort of value.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are a lot of photographers. If you go to, you follow a lot of photographers work, the majority of them have websites, and the majority of them are selling prints in some form. So you can use that as a
bit of
a guide. Yeah, sure.
Cool. Obviously, you shoot a lot in your local area. Have you got any favourite locations that don't have to be in your local area, and you don't have to tell us your secret ones? Yeah.
Yeah.
But have you got any places that just keep drawing you back that you keep going to? And I don't mean the ones that you go to for convenience. I know I'm talking about the ones that you're either got unfinished business with, or you just love it so much that you got to keep going there.
Yeah, great question. Yes, and many. The coast is littered with headlands, like I was saying, and everyone has a unique surf break. There are some that are easier to shoot than others and require a lot more swimming and less swimming. So just down on the south coast, I might have 6 or 7 breaks that I'll frequent, and that all depends on the swell and wind direction and what the tide's doing and things like that. And if I could be bothered driving down, I'm happy to drive 200 k's, stay the night, shoot a break, and then come back up the next day if I know it's going to be good.
Yep.
But yeah, I live 600 meters from the beach here. Unfortunately, it makes you lazy. So it makes me lazy. I just get up and I know the coffee shop's open when I get out of the water. But there's always something to be made down there. And I always try to pursue a newer and better vision of what I've created in the past. But yeah, there's a lot of breaks. There's some big waves that break when the swell's huge, and it might only be every 5 years or so. And we'll converge on that as photographers and surfers, and you find that the same guys are all meeting up, and it's great because you get to see them and see what they're doing with their lives and their careers. Yeah. But I noticed it in a lot of landscape places. Just for example, the Cathedral Rocks down in Kiama, down this way, is quite a well-known shot now for photographers, landscape photographers. I think the first photo I took of the Cathedral Rocks was in about 2010, and I might have seen one photographer around at the time. And now when you go down there, when the light's right, and the Milky Way's right, it's all over, and you've got to be first in the hole, and you've got to.
That's it.
It's pretty cool. But that's one thing that you have to deal with as a photographer. And if I teach photography as well, I really like sharing that information. There's a double side to it. You teach people and you show them what you do. They're going to want to go to the places that you shoot and do what you do.
Absolutely.
So you're inherently creating a bit more traffic to those particular spots. Doing so, it's a fine line there for sure.
Definitely. What's your most memorable photography experience?
I probably could go by genre. So creating that image with the vortex rings was that was a highlight of my career, and it gave me a lot of confidence and kicked away some of the self-doubt after that. But then let's go to swimming with humpback whales in Tonga, swimming in a heat run where one female with sort of 15 gigantic 30 to 40 ton whales are chasing her, and we're dropped in the middle of it and taking photos as they're like swimming past you.
Wow.
That is really crazy. Just seeing a whale calf come up to you within a few meters and respond to you when you wave, and that's amazing. The first time I swam with a turtle and photographed a turtle was incredible. Cage diving for great whites down in Port Lincoln, just such a wild experience. Being out in a thunderstorm and hail, they're the ones. They're just so crazy, and they're so good, they're so rewarding. But not really one particular one, because there's been so many.
So many.
There's a lot of places I'd like to go. As you were speaking to me before the show, was you're going to a few parts of the world that you haven't been, and that's exciting, and hope to create something over there. There are a few places in the world I'd like to go and visit as well, and take the gear over and see the gin clear water of Tahiti, or the big waves and shore breaks of Hawaii. And I'd love to go and visit the West Coast, swim with whale sharks and things like that. So there's a lot on the bucket list, and there's a lot on the to-do list.
Awesome.
Which is cool. Yeah.
It's always good to have a nice long bucket list too.
You bet. You betcha. Yeah, it just means time and money.
That's exactly it. What about horror stories? Have you had any disasters or near disasters?
Just Just when I guess I pushed myself too far into a particular wave or reef break, and I've come off second best, got too close, and I might have got sucked over, and I come up with battered and bruised and a little bit of
Yeah,
skin missing. But that could potentially be quite bad. The gears come off second best, so I flooded housings and damaged things like that. Haven't
yeah,
really. I've been just the experience wise. It's you've got to be very conscious of what you're doing when you're in the ocean because you're at the mercy of those elements. You know,
absolutely.
scaling down a cliff in the dark and your adrenaline's making you feel sick, and you've got to jump into the water, into dark water. It's not something that most people find. It's not an attractive thing to go and then swim there for say 2 hours whilst you're watching a wave break just meters from you and exploding, and it's like grenades going off.
Yeah,
And then you see fins pop out of the water, and it's the fishy smell, and seals pop up, and all sorts of. They're the kind of things that get your heart racing. That it's.
yeah, yeah.
I'm still here to talk about it, so
Yeah,
it
that's
can't
it.
be. It can't be that bad. No, I've never. In terms of being injured and things like that, I did take a couple of beatings that put my back out. I've had broken limbs, like bones and things like that over the years. But mainly it's RSI and things. Your
Yeah,
body, it takes a toll on you after a while. The water housings that I use, this is it's a larger water housing, but that's a 70 to 200 in that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
for 2 hours, I'm swimming around with that, and it
That's a lot
just
of weight to be
smashes you.
packing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But no, I've been quite lucky. Touch wood. I'm touching wood right now. But yeah, nothing significant happens to me because I'm on the other side of, I'm in the other side of the 40s now.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's just doing it every day, every second day for the past decade or so. It just takes its toll.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
And yourself?
Oh, haven't had any real dramas. My wife, we were actually in the Lake District last year, was it? Yeah, it was last year. And she fell down the side of a hill. We were on a track which was quite narrow, only about a foot and a half wide.
Hmm.
And she was about 10 metres in front of me walking back down the track. We'd finished the shoot up at this waterfall. And we were about a 2.5 hour hike from the nearest farm where there would be a phone. There was no phone reception in the valley at all because there's no towers anywhere there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she literally fell off the side of this hill and rolled head over heels and landed in this hollow of a couple of rocks next to a stream.
Wow.
Luckily, she didn't get wet or anything, and luckily, she thinks she cracked a rib,
Hmm.
but then there's not much you can do for a cracked rib. They basically say breathe lightly and don't laugh.
I couldn't
So,
imagine being there and seeing that. The
yeah, it
person that
was.
you
I've still
love and
got
loves. And,
PTSD about it.
oh, geez, I'm glad she's
He
fine.
doesn't
Like,
remember a
okay,
thing, but
okay.
yeah, I thought she'd broken a neck or something because of the way that she rolled over and fell. So, yeah, that was a bit scary, but I
Hmm.
haven't. Luckily, I'm of an age where safety first is
Yeah.
basically what I'm about. I don't go scaling down cliffs and jumping into dark water.
No, there's the little person that determines your risk factor.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
that person's a little bit stronger these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've damaged gear and I've dropped things off.
Oh yeah,
It's just
I've drowned a couple of cameras, but not. I haven't actually gone in the water. It's been waves.
mhm.
I remember I was standing at Coogee when I killed one, the Ivor Row pool, the one with the concrete sort of blocks
Yes.
around it. I was standing there with my back to the seawall, and this wave came through, hit the back of the seawall, came up and over the back of me, and all over the camera and the gear, and yeah, killed the camera.
Wow. Yeah, it's not a good feeling, is it?
No, it's a bit sickening.
The first thing because it's happened to me a couple of times, is, and my fault because I'm just rushing. I didn't not
Yeah.
checking seals and things like that. The first thing I do is ring my wife and say, "Hey, is my camera insured? Or
Mm.
when's the last time? Is it up to date?
Yeah, is the insurance
And
up to date?
why? What have you done?" But yeah, in that regard, the box of rice doesn't solve that for me,
No, no.
unfortunately.
mine, the box of rice didn't work, so it was down to the shop and paid about $600 or $700 to get new innards put into it.
God, wow. Yeah, mine was straight to one of the predominant retail stores down here and just handing over a credit card.
Yeah, buy a new one.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about processing before we finish up. Are you straight into it when you get back out of the water, or leaving them to gestate for a while?
Bit of both. Because I do regularly shoot and I use it as a form of exercise
Yep.
too. So some days I go out and I'll take the camera with me because I might make a shot. And I'll come back and I'll dump those photos into a drive and I'll put a date on it and the location, and I might not touch them. I just leave them and they bank up. There are other times where I know I've actually got the shot that I wanted, and I'll come back and I'll spend a little bit of time on making the best version of what I saw out of that shot.
Yep.
But I have so many images, like shooting waves, it's just relentless some mornings, and there's only so much you can do, so much time. By the time I've finished, I'll get up at 5, I'll go and shoot for 2 hours, 3 hours. I'll come back completely exhausted, have a coffee and a shower, and then I consider going down to the shop and opening up. Sometimes those images just never get seen.
Yeah.
I find it difficult to process once I'm at the gallery because there's just too many distractions. The ambient light just doesn't work in the store.
Yep.
So I like to process when I'm at home, and that will be to music and headphones on and a glass of wine. So yeah, and I'll try to revisit the feelings and emotions I felt at the time, whether it be taking a photo of a whale or a shark or a turtle. But what I find too, Grant, is when I was over in Tonga, it was most apparent there was swimming alongside those whales, and you're photographing them, and you're seeing these gigantic eyes. They're huge. They're looking at you, and that it draws so much emotion. So you're just overwhelmed. I remember coming up after photographing my first whale, and the guys on the boat are saying, "Yeah, how was that?" And your goggles had filled with tears. You can't articulate the feelings you're having at the time, and you're really lucky to be able to bring a camera along to document what you're seeing. And those feelings, and you're looking back on the back of the camera, is just incredible. Now come back home, and 2 or 3 weeks later, you're revisiting those photos. It's really disappointing. You feel underwhelmed because the feelings that were evoked at the time and that relate to the photos you're looking on the back of the camera, and that immense high that you're feeling, it's not there. So you have to find it and draw on it somehow. And I find that sometimes too, if you look at the images and you go to process them straight away, it just doesn't happen. You feel depleted of those emotions that were there at the time. So leave them, go back to them and revisit them at a later stage. But there are other times where I'll see something on the back of the camera and I can't wait to get home and share it, because I'm really proud I've been chasing that image for a long time. And when it sees a print, and you turn that, because that's been my ultimate goal for many years, is to turn those thoughts and everything into print. There's nothing more rewarding to me than that's the final destination for an image. And I've been incredibly lucky to be able to do that through the shop. And yourself, like you don't go out and take one shot, and you have different experiences definitely. Once you're out there and the light's constantly changing and everything, the mood's different. And sometimes you'll see, for me, a turtle, a whale or a dolphin or things like that. And it just really makes you, this is where I need to be at the time. You really feel like you're in the right spot. So when you get back, how do you go through the images and you just think?
I usually try to get them onto the computer as quickly as I can to back them up, because I don't trust them sitting on cards.
Awesome.
In the camera. But I normally give them a quick whiz through. I might edit one or two that I think are worth taking a look at. Sometimes, depending on what I've been shooting and how I'm feeling about it when I get back. If I'm too tired, I might only do one and just leave it at that. And sometimes you look at them and go, there's nothing that I'm really feeling there. So sometimes it'll be a few weeks before I get the feeling back and say, all right, I want to dive into this one. This last weekend up the coast, I've probably about 6 or 7 already. I took my laptop with me and did a few while I was away
Mhm.
during the day while we were relaxing and not doing much else. And then there's probably about another 10 or 12 that I know I've got these compositions that I took there and I want to get into. I just haven't had the time since I've been back, and so they may wait a day, they might wait a week. We'll see
Yeah,
how we
yeah.
go.
Good stuff. Yeah, and you know what? You'll look at them too, and you think, you know what, that could be a better sunrise. I'm going to leave
That's
that
it.
there,
Yeah.
and that same rock, I'm going to go back to it, and I'm going
Oh
to do
yeah,
better.
there's a set of rocks there at, in Shoal Bay. It's one of the spots that I just keep going back to because every time you go, the tide's slightly different at
Yep.
sunrise, so you get more exposed rock or less exposed rock, and sometimes it's really cold, and I don't feel like wading into the water to get out to where the rocks are
Exactly. Yeah.
are getting some movement on them, for example. So it's one spot that I keep going back to go and the sunrise wasn't good enough. I want a better one.
Hmm. And you've probably heard this a million times. I'll get up every morning and I'll check outside the window and I check the cams and things like that. And
Yeah,
I look for that gap in that horizon, you know, with the thick
yeah,
peppery
absolutely.
cloud over the top. And if I go back to bed, I generally miss something good. So I stay up and I go down and shoot. And if it's
Yeah,
no good, at least I'm down there. And you've got to be there present at the time.
that's it.
Something my wife always says to me. She always says, "There'll be another sunrise tomorrow."
That's
And
it.
and I know it rings true, but the FOMO is stronger with me
Yeah,
than it is with her.
it's hard to avoid. I, particularly when I was working full time as well as doing photography as a side gig. The number of lovely sunrises I saw while I was on the train going to
Wow,
work instead of being out at the beach. Rather be, which is why I'm now doing this full time and not doing
great.
not doing that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
And for an example, so this morning I drove to the beach, put my wetsuit on, loaded the camera in, and I went to test the camera, and
mm,
I forgot something on my camera that plugs into my.
ouch.
So do I shoot from shore in my wetsuit, which I couldn't do, or do I drive home, which was I'm driving away from a sunrise
Yeah,
to get that lead, and something I could have checked. It's
yeah,
just in rushing. And do I drive away? Then that's what I did. So I got there just in time and back into the water. But it's yeah, that's the constant thing for me. I like getting exercise too, like moving around and swimming every day is just a bonus. Being
yeah,
able to do
absolutely.
that and have that and come back and be a lot healthier for it.
Yeah,
That's another reason I love the ocean.
yeah, awesome. How do you push past creative blocks and overcome those challenging times when the head says don't do it, or I
Mm.
don't want to do it, or it's warmer in bed and it's too cold outside?
Two ways. I will generally naturally allow myself not to push it. I'll just give it a break and I'll leave it might for a week or 2 weeks before going back out. And I think that also too, if you do that, you're more conscious of yourself and your thought process and your feelings and everything, because you can push it and then you can, if it's forced, you can actually dislike the process
Yeah,
and it doesn't feel natural and the rewards aren't there for it. On the other, let's flip the coin. And the other thing is if you push it, you're actually forcing yourself to create something even though it might not be there for you. And that I'll do the latter. The regular process of me getting up and getting out into the water every day means that something will occur at some stage in front of my lens
yeah,
and a light will go off. And whether it's just a ripple on the water or the color or it's just something, or pointing the lens back to shore
mm,
and taking photos of the buildings and the landscapes from the water as the sun's rising, then something else sparks that creativity. And I think, okay, how can I do this? What lenses can I use? So
yeah,
then, so that process of just relentlessly going out into the ocean, not necessarily with any sort of idea to make an image.
mm,
Sometimes they come to you whilst you're out there. So just intuitively, you've got to listen to yourself, but you've also
Yeah.
got to think, if I continually just have a writer's block and I don't push myself, then I'm not really pushing the envelope. And then once you get past that, you find that you open up different realms and ways to shoot. And if you're not in that environment and you're stuck at home in bed, then those things will never present
Yeah.
themselves to you.
Got to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
Good question. That's a really good question, because we have AI in the mix now.
Mm.
And I see a lot of posts in the social media world passing photography as AI. And they're not necessarily disclosing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Digital photography has its things too. Like when we first started making images, digital photography, you use a digital software to process that image, and then where do you draw the line at what's real and what's not, and your interpretation versus art and everything. But I think the AI is going to be something pretty significant and pretty scary.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I also feel that people become so accustomed to social media and living behind in that world. I
Mm.
think it's going to be more precious of people's time and experience to go out and experience the reality. Looking at images on the internet and seeing what people can create is wonderful, and it's still another form of expression,
Yep.
creatively and artistically. But I don't think anything will actually be going into the wilderness and doing it and feeling those feelings firsthand.
Yeah. Totally agree.
It's something that I think will come around full circle, and I think those experiences are going to be more sought after than, and that's why I really like teaching people photography, because it's, you're taking them out, you're seeing what they see when they make an image, and the elation that you're seeing on people's faces when they actually create something that they've wanted to do for so long. And then you give that, you say, you can do this, go out into the world and create.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's always been a challenge. And I think that social media, people are becoming more desensitized to it, because the immediacy of the nature of that platform is also, it's going to kill it at the same time.
Totally.
I used to shoot for print magazines, and I'd get a photo and I'd send it in and they say, that's it, that's going to be a cover shot. 2 months later, it comes out. And
Yeah.
in this day and age, 2 months is unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And print magazine and that sort of that medium has suffered significantly, to the point where there might only be 3 or 4 titles now printing, and it's a lost. People see it as a lost art, but I see it as still an amazing platform, because that's what I love to see. 5 seconds on Instagram as a thumb scrolling through is not an indication of what you should be looking towards with your art.
Yeah.
Your time is important, and your finances are important. All your gear and your thoughts and your creativity to place something on a small platform that's 2 inches wide is just doing it yourself an injustice, I think.
Totally.
I think that my advice would always be print something, get it printed, translate what you're seeing off a camera onto the print, hang it in your home. And if you get sick of looking at it, or you know you can do better, then that's an indication of you growing and you're evolving as an artist.
Exactly.
So that, for me, I think that more and more people are going to be looking at real experiences rather than the AI world. I could be very well wrong, but I'm lucky. I come from an era where I traveled to different parts of the States to play a live show in front of people without
Yeah.
poker machines, drinking beers and you're listening to your music, and then drive home that night.
Yeah.
Now, back in the day, you can now record and you can do live shows on the internet, and you may not even have to have ever played a live show with an instrument,
That's
have
right.
1 million followers and sell albums. You know, I like the former.
Yeah. No. The thing is, I think the reaction that you get from somebody that sees something in print and sees something in the flesh and can talk to you personally, as opposed to a 3-word comment like "nice shot, mate," whatever it is that you might. I'm not. Please, followers, don't stop doing that. I love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know what? And I do, when I genuinely see something in a photograph, I'll make an effort to
Yeah,
make a comment, even behind the scenes, because a few of my peers in the past did that for me, and
Yep.
that fueled me into thinking, I know, it gave me that push. And
Absolutely.
it was a wonderful feeling seeing a comment from your peer spotting something like that. So for sure, yeah. What do you think? What's the in the realm of photography? What do you think is going to be a challenging thing in the
In terms of
future?
challenges, I hate to say it, but I think the environment and climate change is going to be one of the biggest challenges if we don't actually. Our current government and previous governments don't seem to have grabbed the bull by the horns enough to actually start turning things around. And
Hmm.
so for me, I think the challenge for photographers is a that advocacy piece up front saying, hey, come on, we need to do something about this. But B, if we don't, and if things don't change, then the environment's going to change. And I can see a fair amount of that sort of disaster journalism, for want of a better term, for that photography being are much more prevalent simply because there's so many more disasters out there to cover. And for me, that's going to be a significant challenge in the next little while, and until government starts to change what they do.
Yeah, we've done, and I see too, and being an ambassador for the ocean in many aspects and different
Yeah,
charities and things that I advocate. It's as important now as it is has ever been.
absolutely.
And there are a lot of people that say what they have their different thoughts and views and perspectives on climate change. But I spend a lot of my time in the ocean and around the coast as you do, and
Mm,
I've seen change. And I'm at an age now where I've actually seen things happen due to our what we've done.
yeah,
But there's never there's never a bad time to start change. And I
definitely.
think that we can all do something, whether it's pick up a piece of trash and put in the bin off the beach and collect something from the beach, right through to doing everything you can in terms of your entire life, your footprint. But
Absolutely.
but yeah, it does come. A lot of it does come from the top and the big corporations. But without that pressure and that growing awareness, then nothing will change. We're all
Yeah,
becoming a bit more conscious, hopefully, of the importance of our future,
yeah,
and we are the guardians of the world that we live in. It's our responsibility to
yeah,
do what we can to ensure there's a future.
yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and what's the worst that could happen if we put pressure on people to consider the environment and what they're doing in terms of plastic and recycling and other things that we can do? What's the worst that can happen if we do look after it and we do swerve and change our ways? Is a better environment and a better the way that we live. That's not going to
Yeah,
be a detriment in the future,
that's right.
regardless of your thoughts on it. So
Totally agree. Totally agree. And then you look at fishermen, you look at guys that are farmers and whatever, that I think in some cases voting against their better interest, because the if that environment gets destroyed, then you're not going to
mhm.
be able to do farming. You're not going to be able to do fishing, because maybe the fish you catch will be more tropical species down here in Sydney. But I know going out in the water there on the weekend in Port Stephens at the end of April, I shouldn't be stepping into water that's 23 degrees.
Mhm.
It's normally getting down to about maybe 20 would be a warm one. Yeah.
Mhm. Would you agree that as in your younger years there were definitive seasons,
Oh, definitely.
and now I'm finding that
They're blurred,
we more to
totally
have
blurred.
two seasons that kind of cross over, and we're having a lot of really
Yeah,
the weather's been quite wild in both of those are overlapping.
totally. Yeah,
But everything from building right to the water's edge and scarping and all the things that go with nature. And instead of letting nature do its thing, we sort of
yeah,
just keep encroaching on it. And
yep.
once it's developed, we will never undevelop.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Ultimately, nature will take it all back.
You know what? That's right. Yeah, is the
We,
ultimate power, right?
it's, yeah, that's the thing, is the earth itself won't be destroyed.
Mm,
It'll be our lives and maybe our entire species that does, and unfortunately probably a load of other species along with us. But the Earth itself will take it back and turn it into what it can.
The one thing I always say is that we're all, and I'm a hypocrite, so I'm happy to advocate for a better environment and ways to change the way we create and what we use and how we use it. But I'm also talking to you on a laptop via messaging you through a phone and things like that. And I'm mindful of those things. I'm also too, I'm not saying that I'm going to go out and I'm against these kind of fishing, because you can go to a restaurant and have some meat, or you go to have some fish. So it's just the balance has to be looked at consciously.
Definitely.
If the smaller things you can do lead to bigger decisions, and you become more aware of it. And if you do that and you become more vocal about it without trying to force your views down people's throats, I always that actions speak louder than words. So I'd rather go along and pick up rubbish, and people ask me, "What are you doing?" And I'll say, "I'm just going to pick up some rubbish off the beach." And if that's a humbling thing for me I'd see somebody do that, I want to join them. It means that they're thinking, so that they're going home and they're also conscious of they're away from the beach and the ocean. So they're also thinking about their voting decisions and how the time that they invest into charities and organisations that have that push. Yeah, we're getting there. You're always going to see some negative visions of nature, because it has to happen. We have to see those, because that's the trigger that shows that we could do better as humans.
So we're not doing enough.
Yeah.
We're going to have to finish up fairly soon. Do you have any photographers that you think I should be talking to?
I have. I've done a lot of work with. He's a very good friend of mine. I actually have his artwork on my wall. A lot of respect for Russell Ord. He's one of the world's greatest ocean photographers. Amazing human, father. There's so many sort of people in that genre of photography that you'd find interested to talk to. Off the top of my head, there's Phil Thurston and Matt Burgess and Steen Barnes, and the list goes on. I'll message you quite a few after we speak. Fantastic. But they all have different stories and different backgrounds, and their outlook on photography is it's different. And I found it fascinating. Dylan Robinson, he's another guy who does a lot of portraiture and lifestyle imagery and landscapes. And I'm really inspired by those. They happen to be also my friends as well. So that's quite amazing too. So thank you. A real privilege to chat to you. It's nice to have some time and to be able to share my thoughts and
absolutely. I've got one last question for you.
Please do. Sure.
Yeah, a lot of the listeners think it's the most important issue that we've got to get to the bottom of with photographers.
Yep.
Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Yes. Pineapple on everything, burgers, everything.
Fantastic.
Do I like it? I love it.
Well done.
Thank you, Grant. Been a pleasure chatting to you, mate.
Thanks for taking the time to spend some time with me today. It's been wonderful getting to know you a little bit better and to actually catch up with you. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, my Instagram, Warren Keelan, warrenkeelan.com for my online print store. And I have a gallery in Wollongong. That's the usual haunts. Thank you so much. Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show. Keep listening, because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. If you're interested in buying prints or photography gear or doing a photo workshop with me, these are now on sale on my website. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.